Today we sit down with Father George Elliott, priest of the Diocese of Tyler and pastor of Catholic Nacogdoches, to discuss what does it mean to have a thriving parish. We talk about their discipleship pathway, how they are forming parish leaders, and how this model of accompaniment has impacted the way they minister to engaged couples and college students. We hope that you enjoy. Welcome to Life Beyond the Chariot, a faith and family series from the St. Philip Institute. We believe we are called to not only know, but also to live the truth of the gospel within our homes, in our workplaces, and beyond. We believe we are invited to encounter Christ in the messiness of day-to-day life and to live as his disciples. Welcome back to another episode. Today we are really excited because we have a special guest, Father George Elliott from Catholic Nacogdoches. How are you, Father?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and how many places you're responsible for in the diocese?
Yeah, so I'm a priest of the Diocese of Tyler. I've been ordained for 8 years now, and I'm assigned to Catholic Nacogdoches, which is a kind of, we call it like a hub or a group of churches together. So there's Sacred Heart Parish, and then 3 mission churches, which is Our Lady of Guadalupe. And Our Lady of Guadalupe is a largely Hispanic parish, and then Immaculate Conception, that is kind of a country parish, and Our Lady of Lourdes is another kind of country parish, and then campus ministry, just St. Mary's Catholic Campus Ministry at Stephen F. Austin. And then we have a school as well, Chesterton Academy, which is called St. Boniface.
Nice. I love that you're one of our younger priests, but you have a lot of responsibility in the
Yeah,
diocese.
there were many years in my life when I thought to myself, who thought this was a good idea? But you know what? We survived and things are going great here. So apparently the Holy Spirit knew what he was doing.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Thanks.
Well, one of the reasons why we wanted to talk to you, like last episode, we were talking about the marriage catechumenate, and one of the things that came out of that conversation was this idea of parishes really intentionally accompanying couples through married life and into family life. And a lot of that revolves around a healthy parish and having a pastor that's really like clued in, plugged into what's going on, and really can see all of his parishioners and have a good sense of his flock. And as we were kind of brainstorming, like, well, where are places in our diocese that are doing that? You came to mind because of Catholic Nacogdoches and just a lot of the fruit that we've just had the privilege of seeing and having the opportunity to work with you. I guess the first question for you, Father, would be, when we talk about a vibrant parish life or knowing that a parish is healthy, what does that look like to you, or how do you kind of measure that and have a sense of the health of your parish communities?
Yeah, there's a really good book that's called Made for Mission by Tim Glemkowski, where he does, I think, a really good analysis of the parish. And there are certain areas where the whole area is growing, not just the Catholic community, but the whole area is growing, and you'll see growth in that spot. And people will say, "Oh, wow, look, we've got this thriving parish. It's growing so much." But actually, it's the whole community that's growing, and then the parish is just kind of riding on the coattails of that. And so, you can really only look at growth as one of the examples of a thriving parish if the population as a whole is not really growing. And so I really think that when you look at what does a thriving parish look like, it comes down to really, what are your confession lines? How how long are the confession lines, and what are the quality of the confessions that are being made? And then also, what does the individual prayer life of people look like? Right. So if you say, "Oh yes, what is your prayer life like?" and people say, "Oh yeah, I pray. I say an Our Father in the morning." It's like, okay, well, yes, that you do pray. That's good. But that's not quite to the level of really having a prayer life. It's not something that you're living out of. And so when a parish can begin to see that, no, there there's a significant portion of the parish that is praying daily and has that commitment with time set aside every single day, minimum 5 minutes, all the way up to, people shouldn't scoff at the idea of an hour a day of prayer, kind of broken up throughout the day. When you can get to that point, that's when I think those are some of those external signs that you can really point to and say, yes, this is a truly thriving parish, and it's not just, having some of these other effects that are really the greater world affecting what's going on in the parish.
One of the things that I was reading was actually from this other book. Okay, now I'm drawing a blank. I think it's called Great Catholic Parishes or something, and it had listed like four of the four hallmarks of a healthy parish, and it talked about spiritual maturity and spiritual growth. Which, because that's, you can see the confession lines, like anyone can go and see the confession lines. I think in our diocese, there's a lot of people in confession, which I think is really great. Sometimes we have to get early before Mass, just so you can see like people scurrying to try to get it so they can get it in before Mass starts. But how does a pastor go to assess like the prayer life of the individual? If that's like a sign of vitality, where does someone start? Or like a pastor or parish leaders to say, okay, do the people that we're serving have this individual prayer life, or do you just see the effects of it?
Yeah, so this, I think it parallels something that we did fairly early on here in Catholic Nacogdoches. And to be honest, we're still kind of rolling this out, right? We're still trying to work it out and figure all of these things out. Deanna made me laugh a little bit when you're like, oh yeah, like it's this thriving parish in the sense that like we've arrived, or like, yeah, what's going on in your parish. I thought to myself, like, man, I wish I knew what was really going on, because it seems like it's just this constant process of trying to figure out what's going on. Okay, what's the next step that we need to take, and how do we do that and get everybody else to do that? But kind of the process that we've been following thus far has been essentially giving people an ideal, right? This is what we're aiming for. And then also saying, okay, you may not be at this ideal. Depending on where you're at, here are the next steps and really concrete things that you can do to get to that point. And so at a very parish level, we created kind of vision, mission, and values, just this ideal of what we want our parish to look like. And then we also created what's called a discipleship pathway that kind of breaks down that spiritual maturity into, a handful of steps or stages that we talk about, and kind of what are the characteristics of each of those stages, and what are the practices that someone has in those stages, and then also kind of how do you grow through that stage to the next one. And so, yeah, very similar thing. Part of that discipleship pathway and our vision, mission, and values is prayer in the sacramental life. And so making sure that we're just constantly putting that ideal out in front of people and saying, hey, this is what we're aiming for. This is what we're aiming for. This is what we're aiming for. And then breaking it down very simply, saying, yep, here's step one, pray 5 to 15 minutes a day. And when you do that, you can read the daily readings. You can maybe pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, pray a decade of the Rosary. If you like reading, find a Catholic book that you really like and just spend some time reading that. You can read 2 pages, just take the bookmark out, read your 2 pages, turn the page, put the bookmark back in, close the book, move on with your life, right? Just give really concrete things that people can do. And obviously always encouraging people to pray how you can pray, not how you think you should be praying, right? What is it that actually connects you to God? Do that. When that doesn't work anymore, try something else.
I love that. The thing that comes to mind is just like pastors pastoring is something that really brings me joy to see. It's like the fact that you've invested, so much focus on that, or that there's even a pathway. How many what would our diocese look like if all of us were having these types of conversations about discipleship pathways? Like that doesn't we don't hear about that as often as we probably should. So like in what context do you have the opportunity to talk about these things with parishioners? Is it something where it comes like just from the pulpit on Sunday in a homily, or are you just engaging with parishioners in other ways? Or what does it look like?
Yeah, so And once again, I'm on a pastor pathway. I guess I don't know what the right word, pastorship pathway, right? So the ideal in my mind is everywhere, right? That we are talking about this absolutely everywhere. The places that I find it easiest to talk about, or I find that I talk about it most often, is obviously in homilies where we're preaching about it from the pulpit, encouraging people, hey, here's this ideal that we want to hit in this specific area. So now let's, here are the steps that we can take. And, if you're doing this, take this step. And then also we have a number of four kind of settings in which we form specifically our parish leaders. So just volunteers who are in charge of ministries or who are just heavily involved, pastoral council, things of that sort. And so we talk about our vision, mission, and values and our discipleship pathway all the time in those meetings. We're pumping it into them all the time and really encouraging them to then echo that into their groups. And then lastly, in just kind of one-on-one settings, whether that's a very formal spiritual direction or just a conversation with someone, or even in confession and just giving kind of brief advice in confession and things of that sort. So we try and do it in all of those different places. But I think to myself, man, I could be doing this in a lot more places. We could get this a lot more into the bulletin, into our media, and every single one of our groups. So anyways, that's probably my next stage of growth.
You have some amazing people that work with you in Catholic NAC. And they're just phenomenal. And it seems from the outside looking in that you have a great leadership team, which I think is also really important to sort of help in the vitality of one's parish. How did you get such a good team? And what do you do as a pastor to really, because that you need them. I mean, I'm assuming that you need your team. And I mean, what is some advice that you have on people who either want to be a part of a team or a pastor who wants to form that? Because that seems like kind of a large task. So what sort of worked for you and your team?
Yeah, so with a couple people super early on, I have to admit that I just got lucky, or at the very least, it was totally the Holy Spirit, right? There's definitely a lot of prayer going on, but I had no idea what I was doing. And we just happened to hire a couple of really outstanding people. And then I spent a lot of time actually learning from Protestant churches, if I'm honest. There's a podcast called the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast that's run by a Protestant pastor that also has a multi-site church, because I couldn't really find any Catholic resources that taught me how to do the multi-site thing. And so I said, well, you know what? We're not that different from the Protestants. And so I'm going to go see what they're doing and try this out. And a few of the things that were really emphasized in that podcast, and then other resources that I found out about from that podcast, were, first off, when I hire from now on, I hire first for culture. So it doesn't really matter what the person can do. I can almost always teach them or send them to training to learn how to do what they need to do. There are very few jobs where it's really just, does the person have the talent, right? I mean, choir, like anything musical, they need to have some musical talent. Our accountant needs to have some, needs to be a CPA. And our facilities guys, they need to at least know how to swing a hammer. But we can teach them a whole lot beyond that. And pretty much everybody else, we can train them up from zero. And so, yeah, hiring for culture and being really strict on that, because we will get some people who, man, on paper are just amazing. And they would be such a good option for that, but they don't fit our culture. And we have to tell them, hey, you're amazing for somewhere else, because that's just not what we are and how we are. So first off, clarifying what is our culture. And that was a lot of our vision, mission, and values. And then hiring according to that and making that the most important thing when we hire people. And then another thing that was really helpful was the idea of professional development but not in an expensive way, but just no, we read books together and then we talk about what we read. And even if we don't necessarily agree with the books, or even if we don't necessarily all agree with each other, that's fine. But those conversations give us the setting in which we can clarify how to apply our vision, our mission, and values. It gives us a chance to kind of almost like turn over the soil, right? Get it all out, and really kind of get into the depth of how we want to work as a parish and as a cohesive leadership team. And I found, yeah, I mean, it's not a lot. We read one chapter a month, and we spend 15 minutes at one of our weekly, leadership team meetings, called directors meetings, discussing what that chapter said. And so it's not a lot, but it's been transformational for us.
That's awesome. And I know we've, as our St. Philip Institute staff, I think we stole that idea from you, and we've gone through a couple of books together. But that does like unify vision. It's amazing how just the simple act of reading a book together, can help to unify and clarify vision for the staff. One of the unique challenges or opportunities that you have in Catholic Nacogdoches is because you have so many different locations, you're really serving a lot of different populations. But one of the things that I have noticed is that there seems to be some intentionality about bringing cultures together. And I know that that's a challenge in the Diocese of Tyler. I was just with some marriage leaders this weekend, and one of the things that some folks were sharing was just that, sometimes in one parish it can feel like two because you have the English speaking and the Spanish speaking parishes. And I know this is a challenge everywhere, no matter what, but what are the things that you've kind of seen that have helped y'all to work towards unity, to really call yourselves Catholic Nacogdoches and not to be like these isolated islands within one city?
Yeah, so I think one of the most fundamental things is that the priest has the pastor, whoever's in charge, has to be able to have real interactions with every language group. And for the most part, that actually means that the pastor needs to be bilingual, at least here in East Texas, where English and Spanish are kind of the two primary ones. I'm working on Vietnamese right now. We have a pretty strong Vietnamese community, but I think that's going to be a while. It's going to take some time. Yeah, and so really kind of being bilingual from the top, because whether we like it or not, a lot of communities end up taking the shape of their leader, without anybody really trying. And so if the leader is not in both, then the community is not, or both communities are not going to be in, right? And then aside from that, we just try to create intentional moments where people can do things together and the language barrier not be a burden. Right. So we generally try to minimize the total number of bilingual masses, because bilingual masses are only enjoyable for people who are bilingual. And for everybody else, it's nice because we're all here, but really it's just painful, right? So we don't do a lot of bilingual masses. We don't do bilingual classes. We try to minimize the number of bilingual meetings that we have. But things like meals, we have, our Friday stations. We do stations separately, English and Spanish, because we have multiple church buildings, right? But then we all come together for a meal because, eating is multilingual, right? Also service. We've got several big service projects where we go and work on people's houses. And, you only need a handful of words to know how to fix up a house, right, in either language. And then we go and we all worked on this house together, and look at it now. I mean, it's beautiful. And so we'll do things like that. Those tend to be the real concrete things that we do to bridge people together. Oh, actually, one last thing. Dancing is also multilingual, and so we have a kind of a World Marriage Day couple date night where we always include music and dancing, because it's just so much fun to see, people who have no ability to communicate otherwise out there on the dance floor having a good time.
I love that so much. And I wish I lived closer to Nacogdoches because if it were down the road, I would be there doing the Cupid Shuffle
Yes,
and
that's right.
the electric slide and learning everything else. I
Next to that
love
old
that y'all do that.
Hispanic grandma and that, young
Exactly.
newlywed American couple. It's wonderful.
Exactly.
So I get excited to hear about all of these things, and some things that seem in thought so simple. I know in execution it takes a little bit more planning, but that y'all have been intentional about how can we bring everyone together. So we know that the language barrier or the culture barrier can be one of a big challenge. Are there any other challenges that have been quite significant that either you expected or didn't expect, and sort of really trying to be unified in your Catholic culture together and building up the vibrancy of your community?
Yeah, actually, one thing we're kind of in the middle of right now is this kind of disconnect between kind of the Catholic status quo, or what in a lot of books are talked about as kind of a maintenance culture versus a mission culture. And so, in general, the maintenance culture is like, well, we're Catholic. We like to do what we've always done as Catholics because it's comfortable and we don't really want any change. I have my pew, and if somebody else sits in my pew, I'm very upset about it and I'm going to complain about it. And I want to have the exact same events. I want to have the exact same potlucks that we have every single year. And, we're just it's all going to be the same. And yes, I know that the generations after us are not continuing to practice their faith, but you know what? I'm comfortable and I don't really want to change anything. That's obviously a little bit of an exaggeration. People don't say that explicitly. Versus kind of this mentality of, hey guys, I don't know if you've looked at the numbers, but things are not great. And so we need to change and create a clear plan and, make sure we're really faithfully adhering to the teachings of Jesus Christ and living it out in a vibrant way, which requires a lot of change, and shaking things up and people being uncomfortable and all of that. And so, I don't think I realized that so many people would be so opposed to change. I think that's really the thing that, right? Because nobody stands there and they're like, no, I want to watch my parish decay and just, die out. And, nobody says that. Nobody thinks that. But when we say, okay, well, then things have to change, then it's like, whoa, I can't handle this change. And any change that does happen, I'm going to fight it tooth and nail. And that's just surprised me.
No, I mean, I know Deanna's area of expertise is sort of the marriage part. And I was an educator for a very long time. And I think when you are in systems, and I notice this all the time, and I even fell into it as a teacher. Like I went in there all excited, like I'm going to do things different, but really back then it was just to be different. There wasn't really any virtue that I was seeking in that, but I came to find out that I just kind of got stuck in the same system. Like if I pour more energy into this system, then it will be better. And I even noticed that among a lot of educators, sometimes in like faith formation, it is really hard to break that mold. Like we can see something's not working. And the idea of change is very intimidating. And a lot of resistance. So what advice would you give either to pastors who are hesitant to make change because there might be that fight, will most likely be that fight back, or parish leaders if they are praying about these things and want to make changes, and even parishioners? So I guess it's threefold: for pastors, parish leaders, and parishioners. what advice would you have in like moving forward, knowing that there's going to be some discomfort and growing pains in the process of moving forward?
Yeah, there are two things that immediately come to my mind. One of them is this seems counterintuitive. It's to try to create a kind of culture in which conflict is perfectly fine, not interpersonal conflict right now where you're just going at people every you're ugly and can't tie your shoes, it's no it's like, no, I disagree with that idea. I think this is broken and needs to change, or hey, this keeps happening and it's not okay that this keeps happening. Because first off, what that does is it gets people into a situation in which they're okay with being uncomfortable, right? Because conflict is uncomfortable. None of us really like it that much. And I mean, I have to admit that I've stood in a number of very uncomfortable meetings because I encourage conflict so much, in which people point something out. And like your first couple of years that you're in a parish and you're the priest there, you can be like, oh yeah, that's a problem from before I got here. But once you've been here for 6 years, like, no, it's my fault. If there's something wrong, it's because I caused it or I didn't fix it yet. And so, yeah, like really having to stand there and take real ownership of the problems that are present in the parish, and actually doing that in front of everybody kind of gets everybody on your team almost when you come up with the solution, right? And involve the people in the solution for the problem. And so what happens in those meetings, just to kind of lay it out more clearly, is when there is a culture of conflict, that means that what everybody is thinking, but they're all afraid to say, actually gets said. And then everybody realizes, oh, we've all been thinking this. Yeah, if we're all thinking this, it's probably a real problem. And then when the leader says, yep, this is a problem, let's think through how to fix it. Then first off, you get buy-in from everybody because they're now the ones identifying the problem and coming up with the solution. And obviously the leader needs to guide the solution. And there are going to be certain solutions where you just say, no, we can't do that because, we're a Catholic church or whatever it may be. But it first off at least gets your leaders, the people who are in that meeting, on board with the change. And then another thing, this I learned also from the podcasts and Protestant resources that I found, is this concept of communicating in concentric circles. It's also a little bit, let's see, Patrick Lencioni is a Catholic business writer. Also, he talks about it as cascading communication, but it's essentially the same thing, that, you communicate with your inner circle and you explain to them the problem and the solution. And then you go a circle bigger and you explain the problem and the solution. And then a circle bigger and a circle bigger. And what happens is, you make sure that you have those inner circles in the meetings with the larger circles, so that when the people who are in these larger circles are hearing it for the first time and they're like, I'm not really sure what to think, what they do is they naturally look towards their leaders. And if their leaders are sitting there nodding their heads yes, because they've already heard this, they're totally on board, they've thought through it and they totally agree, then that next bigger concentric circle, they're all on board too, really just because they're not quite sure. They don't really do this all the time, so they don't know what the solution is. But hey, this other person that they trust is on board, so they're on board too.
I love it. But I'm sure there are bumps in the road. Oh, I'm sorry, my assistant director is looking up, but there are bumps, but that taking the time to have those difficult conversations in parish life, like, that's so valuable. And it's so easy to not have those conversations. But just thinking about the fruit of that long term it just contributes so much to the life of the parish. As we're kind of wrapping up our conversation, I did want to turn towards marriage again, because what you were saying a moment ago about, sometimes we have to do things differently in order to get different results. And what comes to mind for me and just my little family life office is this marriage catechumenate and this idea of we have to do something different. We can't continue forming engaged couples the same way that we were in 1990 in 2023. And so one of the things that I've seen specifically in Catholic Nacogdoches is that y'all have really taken on this vision of marriage formation and are really doing the marriage catechumenate, even though we don't call it that in our diocese. But this idea of accompaniment, and it has, I mean, it took a little bit of work to get that set up in the parish. But I'm interested to hear from you, like, how has that impacted parish life? Like changing to a model where we have mentorship and accompaniment. Do you see a difference in the life of the parish? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because I did want to talk about that too, because it's this other thing that I almost like don't know how to pin it down of why it works so well, but it just does, right? It's kind of, I think of the Witness to Love program, specifically that mentor couple program. I think of it as, you know, in a parish, kind of like NFP and United Finances are in marriages. That like, yeah, if you're using those two in a marriage, like for whatever reason, it just kind of works, right? You know, and it's the same thing with Witness to Love in a parish. That so first off, I don't know if everybody's who's listening to this knows what Witness to Love is, but it's a mentor couple program for marriage preparation. They also do a handful of other things, but what I'm talking about right now is the marriage prep one. And how it works is the engaged couple can choose any couple that they want to be their mentor couple, as long as they're practicing their faith, they have been married for at least 5 years, and they have a marriage that they admire. Is that right? Did I get that right? All right. Yes. And so as long as they have those things, they get to choose it. And what that means is that immediately the engaged couple is open to what that mentor couple has to say. And the mentor couple, not only, you know, as they go through this program, which has videos that carry a lot of the content, and then also a workbook that they go through that carries a good bit of content as well. So first off, the mentor couple throughout this whole thing is being taught how to accompany someone else. And so, you know, we've got all of these people who now just know how to accompany another person, which is an important part of discipleship. But then also it really kind of forms the mentor couple. So it's renewing some of our couples that have been married for, you know, 20 years or more. They're having their marriage renewed. And then these engaged couples, they are getting a real look at what real married life is. And they're developing these friendships with faithful couples in the parish. And so we find our engaged couples, they're much more sticky right after their wedding. They actually stick around and continue to attend mass. And they are much better supported because they already have this relationship with their mentor couple who they can turn to whenever they've got a rough time. In fact, yeah, it's quite often whenever a newly married couple comes to me and says, "Hey, we're having these troubles," I say, "Well, have you called your mentor couple yet?" They're like, "Oh no." It's like, "Okay, do that, and then we'll talk." And usually, you know, it's problem solved. They just needed to talk to their mentor couple, and then also, you know, obviously the mentor couple just grows so much through it as well. It's just it's really outstanding. I mean, it's a secret sauce there.
Thank you for giving us like the best commercial for Witness to Love in our diocese. I'm just gonna like take that snippet and share it with our priests. But I've seen something similar, and I've loved the stories that you've shared with me about the couples who have come back, that are sticking around, like you said. And I think what I'm excited about with this marriage catechumenate is that we're doing a really good job, I think, and especially in parishes like yours, where we're accompanying the engaged couples and civilly married couples before the wedding in a really intentional way, and then trying to plug them into parish life and continuing that, and how important relationship is. And like you said before, Father, like relationship and being a key piece of discipleship, like being able to accompany someone is a key in discipleship ministry. And so when I think about marriage formation, I'm like, how how could a parish ignore marriage formation? Like, we can't leave that out of the equation because it's so integral to the life of a parish. But then also thinking about, how do we help these couples even before married life? So I guess since you're working with college students as well, um, how do you kind of see that kind of plugging into parish life or, vocation discernment or, I don't know. I guess I've just kind of seen marriage formation as something that begins like right out of the womb. And with our young adults, that we should, I mean, in an ideal world, if I had a larger staff, like we would do young adult marriage formation like before they're even engaged or dating. So, but what might that look like? Or what are you already doing, or what would you like to see as far as helping your college students to kind of plug into this pathway of discipleship and marriage, vocation, discernment, all that?
Yeah. So I think of, in an ideal world, marriage formation does start from the womb, and it's done in and through the family because you just grow up in a healthy family, right? Like, all of this that we do for marriage formation should not be necessary, right? In an ideal world. I'm glad it is because you're great and it's great to have you around, right? But really, in an ideal world, we don't need to give a lot of marriage formation, or we should not need to give a lot of marriage formation. And so, especially when it comes to the college students, I find that a lot of them have never experienced a healthy marriage, right? They've never seen what a healthy marriage looks like. And so one of the programs that we have, we call it the Emmaus Connection, right? The kind of like walking with Jesus thing. And it's basically just a sponsor couple or a sponsor family for our college students. And really it's primarily we target and really encourage the students who have never seen a healthy marriage to join that, because that's really what we want to expose them to. Because as you mentioned with vocational discernment, I mean, in spiritual direction, I've seen again and again and again, it tends to happen actually with women more than men, but it does happen with both. Somebody will come and be like, I'm called to religious life. I'm called to the priesthood. I'm like, oh, okay, well, why? And they're like, well, I'm not really interested in getting married. And like immediately when I hear that, I'm like, there's something not right. We are all naturally interested in getting married if we understand what marriage is, right? And as I dig more and more, it turns out that they're not interested in the type of marriage that they have ever seen. And once they actually see healthy marriages, then it's actually very frequent that those people who walked in saying, no, I'm called a religious life, I'm called a priesthood, they actually go off and get married and have some of the most beautiful marriages. And yeah, so I find that's one of the really big things. But then also, I think this touches on the retreat that we have here in the diocese for engaged couples, the 3 to get married. That, when you start dating, when you get engaged and throughout your married life, you need to work a lot on your relationship with your spouse, right? And so if you don't already have a relationship with God, then you're trying to work on too many relationships at once, right? And it's going to wear you out and you're not going to do any of it well. And so we really focus very heavily in with the college students that you need to have a good, healthy relationship with God and then also with yourself, right? You need to be who you are before you start looking for your other half.
I love that so much.
Yeah, I'm sitting here, I'm taking so many notes. I think this is one of the podcasts where I've just been like, okay, note taking.
Same.
Deanna, I don't know what other questions you have. So if I'm out of place asking this question, let me know, because I know we kind of are entering sort of the end, and I know you have another meeting to go to. But I'm just thinking about like you seem as the leader of Catholic NAC to have like being very intentional about what you want to happen, like with your vision, your mission, your values as part of your conversation. What about like if there's a parish where either the pastor is struggling with workload or he doesn't have a strong team or the resources to really pull that together? What advice do you have to just regular parishioners who are sitting in the pew, who desire this vibrant community, and not knowing where to start. Like, what would you offer to the average Catholic sitting in the pew who's like, oh, this sounds really great. What do I do?
Yeah, I really think that the average parishioner in the pew, I'm actually about to, it's like a little ebook. I mean, it's like a super simple thing, but I'm going to publish a little book about how small groups really kind of laid the pathway, laid the path clear for the renewal that's happening here in Catholic Nacogdoches. There were several people that started small groups really before the thriving happened here. And I see a lot of that work as kind of the groundwork that was necessary for what's happening now. And so, you know, open up your house a day a week. I've actually, I was just visiting a friend of mine who the wife leads a women's group and the husband leads a men's group, and they do it every other week, right? So the men meet one week, the women meet the next. It's just one night of the week. It's late enough so that everybody can get the kids down beforehand, and then the dads and moms go over to their house, and yeah, start studying, start growing together, have social events, open up your house on a Sunday afternoon and invite people over, and it can be like a potluck sort of a thing, or you just throw some burgers on the grill, whatever needs to happen. Just start building community around the people that you can connect with, and then start growing with them. And if we do that enough, then the place just renews from the bottom up.
And when will this ebook be out? Because where can we find it?
I've currently sent it to somebody who's kind of an editor. I mean, I'm launching it for a certain reason, and she's the one directing kind of that program. So it's kind of to support her. So I'm waiting for her to hear back, but she's got a lot on her plate right now. So I'll let you know.
Well, we'll blast it as soon as we find it and read it. So thank you so much.
Father, thank you so much for this conversation. We could probably talk for like another hour about all of these things, and
great.
But thank you so much for your ministry, your yes. I know the life of a priest is not easy, but having 5 different places that you're in charge of, and just the depth of that you've invested yourself in leading those places well. And I know it isn't perfect, but man, it is refreshing to talk with priests that have taken it seriously and are learning and growing right alongside their parishioners. But thank you for all that you're doing in our diocese and for leading in that way. We're really grateful for you.
Yeah, well, no, but thank you guys as well. I mean, we didn't talk about the baptism prep, but we use that by the book as well. And so thanks to both of you guys for your leadership and for the work that you've done to develop those programs. It's a huge part of what's going well here. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you. Well, Father, will you close us with prayer and give us your blessing, please?
Of course. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the gift of our faith and the ability to be instruments in your hands, to bring you to people and people to you. Help us to always serve you with all of our hearts, with great love for your glory and for the salvation of souls. And the Lord be with you. Your Spirit, in the name of may Almighty God bless you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, go in peace.
Thank you so much. Thanks be to God.